Rain hammered the city as Elena Brooks stared at the email that proved Marcus Hale had signed her name on the loan. Her hands shook, and the apartment felt smaller than her breath. The screen glowed like a verdict. She whispered that this was the moment she finally broke. Noah Reed called and asked, "Are you safe?" She said she was not sure what safe meant anymore. A thunderclap rattled the window, and her heart answered it. She opened a folder and found her mother's unsent letter. The ink was faded and kind. Grace Patel had once said, "Pain repeats what we protect." Elena read the letter and felt time slow. Marcus texted a half apology that stung like salt. She tasted metal and regret, and sat on the floor with the letter against her chest. "I am not the lie you wrote," Elena said, and her voice steadied. The rain softened, as if listening. She breathed and stood. The apartment did not grow, but her spine did. "This ends now," she said, and the room believed her. Morning crept in with a pale sky and the smell of wet concrete. Elena packed the folder and said, "No more hiding." The street was a mirror of last night's storm, but the air felt lighter. She walked toward Grace's clinic, counting the cracks to keep steady. Cars hissed past like tired whispers. A bus stop had promised reinvention, and she almost laughed. She heard Grace once say, "Change starts where blame ends." Her phone buzzed again, and she silenced it without looking. "I know who I am," she said, and her pace found a rhythm. A courier splashed a puddle, and she did not flinch. The city did not soften, but it seemed to step aside. At the corner light, she remembered her mother's handwriting. It curled like a hand on her shoulder. She crossed with it, and the morning opened. Grace greeted her with a quiet nod that felt like shelter. The waiting room smelled of citrus and books. Elena sat and said, "I brought the proof." Grace listened without reaching for solutions. A clock ticked like a gentle drum. "You are not what happened to you," Grace said, and the words settled. Elena described the forged signature, the months of doubt, the hollow apologies. She felt shame rise and refused to swallow it. "I want my life back," she said. Grace asked her to breathe and to name one true thing. Elena said the letter was kind. Silence allowed it to deepen. The room did not fix her, but it held her together. She realized she had arrived ready to begin, and that was new. Noah met her at a corner cafe and brought 2 waters before sitting. "I'm with you," he said, and the table felt sturdy. Steam rose from the espresso machine like soft armor. Elena told him about the night, the letter, the decision. He did not interrupt. "You do not owe him your silence," Noah said. She felt the words fit like a key. A couple laughed nearby, and the sound did not sting. She outlined her plan to call the bank and a lawyer. Noah said he would take notes and make copies. He smiled and added, "You already sound different." Elena smiled back and said, "I finally hear myself." The cafe noise folded into a gentle hum, and the day gathered itself around them. Back home, Elena spread documents across the table like a map. She called the bank and spoke clearly, naming dates and steps. Her voice did not tremble. "I am disputing a forged signature," she said, and the line went quiet, then helpful. She scheduled a meeting and saved the case number. She emailed a lawyer that Grace recommended. The send button felt like a door opening. Marcus texted again, but the message no longer defined her. She set the phone face down and opened the window to the cool day. "I am enough even here," she said, and the room agreed. The city breathed, and so did she. The letter rested near her hand, present but not heavy. Elena walked into the bank lobby, her breath steady though her stomach twisted. The marble floor echoed her steps like a challenge. She handed the clerk the folder and said, "I'm here to dispute a forgery." The clerk's eyebrows lifted before he disappeared into a back room. The waiting chairs felt like an audience. Elena thought of Marcus and the lies he had layered so neatly, and she felt heat in her chest. A man beside her sighed at his watch, and time stretched thin. She whispered, "Not this time." When the clerk returned, he asked her to sign a statement. She wrote her name slowly, each stroke like a claim on herself. And she left the pen behind and walked out into sunlight. The city felt the same, but she did not. Her voice had lived on the page, and it was only the first page of more to come. Outside the bank, Noah waited with 2 coffees. He held one out and said, "You stood taller in there." Elena took it with a small smile, warmth sinking into her palms. She described the clerk's pause, the papers, the way her signature felt like a new kind of truth. Noah listened, eyes steady, and scribbled in his notebook as she spoke. "You're documenting this like a case file," she teased. He replied, "Because your story matters." A gust of wind lifted her hair, and she tucked it back, surprised at how light she felt. She sipped the bitter coffee and found it grounding. "I almost expected the walls to fall on me," she said. Noah shook his head. "They can't cage you anymore." She looked at the street, cars moving like lines of time, and realized he was right. That evening, Elena sat with Grace in her office again, papers spread across the desk. "Each step feels like climbing glass," Elena admitted. Grace folded her hands and said, "Glass breaks when you stand firm." The words struck Elena like a lantern lit in the dark. She admitted her fear of Marcus confronting her, of the way his charm could twist people's sympathy. Grace leaned forward and reminded her that truth endures longer than manipulation. The clock ticked softly, grounding the silence between them. Elena breathed in and whispered, "I am not afraid of the truth." Grace nodded, eyes warm, and said, "That is the foundation you needed." Elena realized she had carried the proof, but now she was carrying her own voice as well. The next day, Marcus called her, voice sharp and layered with fake concern. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Elena stood at her window, city sounds muffled behind glass. She answered, "Because you did it first." He tried to weave excuses, but she held the silence longer than his words. She remembered the night she found the letter and felt her chest steady. Marcus's voice cracked when he accused her of betrayal. She replied, "The only betrayal was yours." The call ended with static, leaving her alone but not hollow. For the first time, his voice did not shake her foundation. She whispered, "You no longer define me," and the words lingered like armor across her skin. That night, Elena met Noah and Grace at the cafe. Papers were stacked between their cups, the air buzzing with soft conversation around them. Elena explained the phone call, her refusal to bend, and how her silence had finally spoken louder than Marcus's words. Grace touched her hand and said, "That is healing." Noah scribbled notes, then looked up with a smile. "You've already crossed a line you can't go back from," he said. Elena felt fear, but also a pulse of freedom. She watched steam curl from her coffee and said, "I am choosing myself." Grace and Noah exchanged a glance of quiet pride. The cafe lights glowed golden, and the moment felt like a covenant she was making with her own soul. Morning rang with an unfamiliar courage that did not ask for proof. Elena opened the bank's reply and felt the air thin. The audit showed transfers she never saw. "He moved the money in steps," she said. Noah read the lines and said, "Paper trails talk." A tremor rose and did not take her voice with it. Grace called and asked, "What truth are you choosing now?" Elena answered that she would not chase his story anymore. She would build her own and let his collapse. She printed everything and sorted by date like ribs of a bridge. "Marcus counted on my doubt," she said, and the words did not wound. Noah said, "Then doubt is done." The room steadied around her hands. She made a list that did not include permission. It included action. It included tomorrow. In a glass-walled conference room, a lawyer named Ava Morgan reviewed the file with calm precision. "You have enough to file," Ava said, and slid a form forward. Elena felt the old fear arrive late and leave early. She described the forged signature and the timed withdrawals. Ava mapped steps with firm clarity. "We control the timeline now," Ava said. Noah's presence felt like ballast. He asked about risk, and the answer was simple and hard. Truth still costs. Elena signed an affidavit and said, "This is the last time I carry his mess." Ava nodded and promised a notice to the bank by day's end. The city hummed beyond the glass like an engine she finally understood. Elena inhaled and kept the air. Marcus waited outside the building with a smile that had always arrived like bait. "We can fix this," Marcus said. Elena felt the old loop try to load and fail. She answered, "We are not a we." He reached for charm and found a locked door. The wind carried car horns like warnings. "You signed my name," she said, and the sentence did not shake. He called it an accident and called her dramatic. Noah stepped beside her without touching her. Elena said, "You taught me to distrust myself. I am deleting that lesson." Marcus flinched as if the air had turned honest. She did not argue the past. She named the future. "I filed," she said. Silence did the rest. That night, the apartment was quiet enough to hear the past creak. Elena opened the letter again and found a folded note she had missed. Her mother's script curved like moonlight. It named a savings account and a warning from years ago. "Trust your voice," the note said. Elena laughed softly and wept in the same breath. Grace answered a late call and said, "Some truths wait for courage to arrive." Elena wrote the account number and felt a new door form. She was not chasing Marcus anymore. She was answering her mother. "I will not abandon myself again," she said. The room did not echo. It agreed. The night held. Morning returned with a clean edge. Elena met Ava at the precinct to submit a report. "This is accountability," Ava said. Elena repeated the case number like a vow. Noah waited in the lobby and texted a single word, "proud." She smiled and felt it land. The officer asked calm questions, and the answers did not drain her. They filled her. She signed the statement and said, "I release what is not mine." Outside, the day smelled like rain finishing a thought. Grace called and said, "You moved from survival to choice." Elena replied that it felt like breath after a long tunnel. She looked at the sky, and it did not loom. It opened. Elena woke before dawn. The city still hushed. She brewed coffee and stared at the court summons in her inbox. Fear pressed against her ribs, but resolve steadied her. Noah called and asked, "Do you want me there?" She said, "Yes, but I need to walk into it on my own first." She sat with the letter her mother had written, the ink carrying strength like it had been waiting for this day. Grace's words echoed, "Fear loses when named." Elena whispered the fear aloud and found it smaller than she remembered. She dressed slowly, each button like an anchor. The mirror reflected a woman she did not yet recognize but wanted to meet. She whispered, "I belong to myself now." The dawnlight spilled across her face as if it believed her. At the courthouse steps, Elena paused as the crowd moved around her. The stone columns loomed, but she stood straighter. Marcus approached, suit sharp, voice low. "We can settle this without all this spectacle." She turned to him and said, "The spectacle is yours." His eyes flickered with unease, though his smile fought to stay. Noah stood a few feet away, watchful, silent support. Elena stepped forward, ignoring Marcus's attempt to block her path. The courthouse doors opened wide as if daring her to enter. She whispered, "I walk with truth," and climbed the steps. Marcus's words trailed off, empty against her silence. Inside the courtroom, Elena sat at the plaintiff's table beside Ava. Papers lined up before her like pieces of armor. Marcus sat across, smirking at first, but the smirk wavered when the clerk read the charges aloud. Ava whispered, "Stay calm, truth is on your side." Elena nodded and kept her gaze on the judge, not Marcus. He tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced him with a gavel. Elena felt her heart race but also found clarity. "I am not the victim here," she thought. I am the witness of my own strength. Noah sat in the back row, a quiet anchor. Grace's voice in her mind reminded her that healing is not soft, it is fierce. Elena straightened her spine and prepared to speak. When her turn came, Elena stood. Her voice trembled on the first word, but grew steadier with each sentence. She described the forged signature, the false accounts, the long silence she had carried. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting. "You thought I would never find my voice," she said firmly. The judge leaned in, listening with sharp focus. Elena did not speak for pity. She spoke to reclaim her own name. Ava watched with quiet pride. Noah's eyes glistened from the gallery. Grace's words lived in her cadence, reminding her to claim her truth. By the end, the courtroom felt smaller than her strength. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Elena exhaled, like she had held her breath for years. The sky was bright, the air cool, and her chest lighter. Noah walked to her side and said, "You sounded unshakable." She smiled, not in triumph, but in relief. Grace called, and her voice carried through the speaker. "You crossed the threshold," she said. Elena replied, "I know. I felt it." Marcus walked past, face pale, words unsaid. She did not need them anymore. Ava handed her a copy of the filed statement and said, "This is the turning point." Elena held it close, but not tighter than she held herself. The city noise surged around her, but within she heard only calm. Morning thinned the fog on Elena's window as she reopened her mother's note and traced the margin. A faint line hinted at a second email buried in an old archive. Ava guided her through the search with patient clicks. The email appeared like a lighthouse through rain. It held a draft authorization form from years ago, identical to the format Marcus used. "He copied what I once trusted," Elena said, and the room steadied around the truth. Ava said, "This links the forgery to prior access, not consent." Elena remembered handing Marcus a scan for something trivial. He had kept the door, then widened it. Noah read quietly and said, "This is the turning gear." Elena did not collapse under the discovery. She felt the floor rise to meet her feet. She whispered, "I am not the sum of his shortcuts." Outside the building, Elena scrolled through messages Ava had subpoenaed. A thread showed Noah warning Marcus months ago. Her chest pinched, then loosened. Noah said, "I told him to confess and repay. I thought he would choose decency." Hurt pricked, but the words did not fracture her trust. "You tried to stop a collapse," she said. He nodded, and admitted he feared pushing her too soon. "I did not want to steal your voice," he added. She let the wind move her hair while her thoughts aligned. Grace texted, "Remember that love without honesty is a leash." Elena breathed and said, "Thank you for telling me now." The day did not dim. It sharpened. She saw the line between care and secrecy, and stepped to the side of clarity. Ava called from her office with an update that rang like a bell. Compliance logs showed Marcus used a defunct notary stamp and uploaded Elena's old scan minutes later. "He rehearsed the shortcut," Ava said. Elena let the sentence settle like a key finding its lock. She did not feel shame. She felt alignment. Grace's voice over speaker said, "This is not your flaw. This is your boundary being named." Elena pictured the bridge of dates she had laid out. Every plank now clicked into place. Noah asked if she wanted to leave the room. She chose to stay. "I will witness the details," she said. The past no longer stalked her. It testified for her. She lifted her pen and wrote, "Proceed," in the margin of her notes. They met Marcus in a mediation room that smelled of paper and lemon polish. He began with practiced sorrow that slid off the table. "It was to save the company," Marcus said. Elena answered, "You spent my name." His eyes flashed with old bravado, then wavered into something human. He described nights of debt collectors and a pride that refused mercy. She heard the ache and did not excuse the harm. Ava set the terms with clean edges. Repayment, apology, withdrawal of claims. You do not own my story, Elena said. Marcus looked smaller inside his suit, and for a breath she grieved the future they pretended to hold. Then, she let it go. Not out of cruelty, but out of truth. She stood when the offer slid across, and she did not tremble. Back home, Elena opened the savings account named in her mother's note. The balance was not wealth, but it was anchor. She rested her hand on the desk, and felt warmth return to her fingertips. You saved a future I could not see, she whispered to the room. Grace called and said, use it to keep your ground, not to carry his weight. Elena nodded and moved funds to secure fees and living space. She chose a lock change, a class she had postponed, and a small weekend alone by the coast. Noah texted proud again, and she smiled without needing rescue. She closed the ledger and felt quiet spread like light under a door. I am enough to choose well, she said. The knight agreed, and did not ask her to prove it. The courtroom filled again, but this time, Elena felt her breath align with the walls. The judge entered, and the weight of silence pressed like stone. Marcus' lawyer tried to frame the debt as a desperate mistake, but the evidence stood taller. Ava whispered, let them scramble, we hold the ground. Elena gripped her folder, not for safety, but for clarity. She listened to Marcus stumble through explanations, each word hollow. She remembered every night of doubt and realized none of it lived in her body anymore. When asked to confirm her statement, she stood with spine straight and voice steady. The signature is not mine. The truth is. The echo did not feel like weakness. It felt like a line drawn in steel. Marcus's voice cracked as he tried to explain the transfers. It was survival, he said, but the words rang thin. Elena looked at him, not with anger, but with distance. She whispered to herself, I release what was never mine to carry. The judge asked direct questions, and Marcus faltered, his answers unraveling. Noah, seated in the back, clenched his notebook, his eyes never leaving her. Grace's words echoed in Elena's mind, pain belongs to its maker. She repeated it silently and felt the weight dissolve. For the first time, she did not see Marcus as the wall blocking her. He was only a shadow fading in the light she now chose to stand in. During recess, Elena stood in the hallway, sunlight spilling through high windows. Ava said, You've already won, even before the verdict. Elena smiled faintly, her breath lighter. Noah joined, holding a bottle of water, and said, You sound unshakable in there. She replied, Because I finally believe myself. She felt the shift deep in her ribs, a breaking point that was not collapse, but creation. Marcus passed by, eyes lowered, no words left sharp enough to reach her. Elena did not flinch. Instead, she turned toward the courtroom doors with Ava and Noah beside her. She whispered, Let's finish this. And the words tasted like freedom. When court resumed, Ava laid out the last piece of evidence with precision. Marcus looked smaller with each detail, his shoulders sagging. The judge's expression did not soften. Elena closed her eyes briefly and felt her mother's handwriting pulse in her memory. She opened them with resolve. I am not afraid of this moment, she thought. Noah caught her eye from the gallery and nodded. Grace's voice arrived like an unseen hand. Your worth is not on trial. Only his choices are. The gavel struck once, and the silence stretched wide. Elena realized the fear had not just eased. It had vanished. The judge announced that Marcus had knowingly committed fraud, ordering restitution and penalties. Elena inhaled, the sound steady, not sharp. She looked at Marcus once more and saw not a monster, but a man bound by his own choices. I am free, she thought, and the words did not need her lips. Ava clasped her shoulder gently. Noah met her outside the courtroom with a smile that reached his eyes. Grace's message buzzed on her phone. Healing is not loud. It is steady. Elena stood on the courthouse steps, the city alive around her, and she felt herself align with it. She whispered, I was always enough. Morning drifted in on sea air, and Elena walked the quiet shore with her shoes in hand. Waves stitched silver lines across the sand, steady as a pulse. She thought of the verdict and felt no echoing fear, only space. Noah said, "You look like yourself," and the words landed soft and true. She answered, "I hear myself now," and let the tide erase her footprints. A gull cried, and she smiled at the ordinary beauty of it. Grace's message arrived, a blessing in simple words about rest and roots. Elena tucked the phone away and breathed like the horizon was inside her. The day did not promise perfection, only presence, and that was enough. At the hardware shop, Elena chose a strong new deadbolt and laughed at how ceremonial it felt. "A door can be a promise," Noah said, and she nodded. Back home she turned the screws, steady and careful, as if stitching her life closed where it once tore. She pressed the latch and heard a sound like certainty. "Welcome back," she told the rooms that had seen her break and rebuild. The window carried the scent of rain and dust, and it felt like clean truth. She brewed tea and left the door open to the afternoon light. When it closed, it was by her hand alone. In the evening, Elena sat with Grace at the clinic garden, the air cool and fragrant. "What do you want now that you are not defending yourself?" Grace asked. Elena answered that she wanted to learn again. A flyer for a night class in storytelling lay on her lap like a quiet dare. "Your voice has earned the room," Grace said. Elena let that sentence root. She imagined the first page, not about pain, but about becoming. They sat without filling the silence, letting it heal what noise could not. The garden lights blinked on, soft as stars within reach. First class night, Elena stepped into a room of open notebooks and hopeful eyes. The instructor asked for a single sentence that mattered. Elena wrote, "I was always enough," and felt warmth spread through her chest. Noah waited outside with a thermos, and when she emerged, he said, "How did it feel?" She replied, "Like turning on a light I thought was broken." The city hummed, not as a threat but as company. She tucked the page into her bag like a small living thing. On the final quiet night, Elena stood at the window, the city a constellation of ordinary lives. She placed her mother's note in a frame beside the lamp. "Thank you," she said to the woman who had waited inside her voice. She did not think of Marcus. She thought of tomorrow's page, and of tea, and of laughter that would find her. Noah texted a simple moon emoji, and she laughed, light and sure. "I am enough," she said. And the room did not argue. It glowed. The night held her, and she held herself back, steady and whole, ready to begin again.